Can we now hear from Dr. Gay Defiesta from University of Philippines, Visayas? Dr. Defiesta was the former academic vice president of UPV. And also, I'm very happy that Dr. Gay Defiesta is the only one who understands what risk as a function of HEBC mean in the Climate Change Commission. So I'm very happy, Gay, that we are together and we can assert for a more comprehensive, interactive, integrative, convergent pathways to resilience in the Climate Change Commission. Okay, Doc Gay? Yeah.
Thank
You
you,
can
Ma'am
share your
Emma.
screen. Yeah, okay.
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 Okay. They're sharing my screen already.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Gay Defiesta, and I'll be presenting our research, Prospects for Equity and Resilience, Lessons from Social Vulnerability Analysis. My co-authors are Alan Moscoso and Leah Araneta. Next, please. As an introduction, we know that the effects of climate change is felt worldwide, but its impacts vary across countries, communities, and households. These differential impacts exacerbate poverty and inequality that can undermine resilience and sustainable development. Understanding social vulnerabilities of communities and social groups is crucial in developing appropriate policy interventions that ensure equitable resilience. Next, please. We define social vulnerability as social vulnerability shows the socioeconomic and political context in which hazards occur. It is a pre-existing condition and an inherent characteristic. For example, being female can be a social vulnerability in highly patriarchal societies. It is driven by social, political, historical, economic processes and structures that weakens a community's ability to prevent human suffering and economic losses in disaster events. Social vulnerability is highly related to resilience and equity. Next, please, sorry. Socially vulnerable groups bear the brunt of climate change impacts. For example, women and girls in highly patriarchal societies suffer more during disasters. Studies shows that there is higher incidence of injuries and deaths among women and girls in major disaster events, such as the Indian tsunami, for example. And because of inherent vulnerability, such as poverty, lack of access to basic needs, coping is difficult and recovery is longer for these groups or individuals. For example, in oil spill-stricken communities here in Western Visayas, in 2007 and 2006 and 2007, I think, women were marginalized in relief and damage compensation because their contribution in the fishery was considered less significant. So recovery was quite difficult for them at that time. So social vulnerability weakens resilience to disasters, and understanding such vulnerabilities is crucial in resiliency and equity. Next, please. So our study was conducted in Iloilo City, Central Philippines in 2020. This is part of the Climate and Disaster Risk Assessment of the study, which is a component of the Coastal Cities at Risk Philippines, headed by Dr. Porio. It included all the 180 communities or barangays in the city. We used the Philippine Statistical Association census data of 2015 and 2017 barangay profile and other relevant data from the local government unit. It covered 18 variables relating to age, sex, population density, dependency, housing, informal settling, disability, education, and water access. We used factor analysis using principal components method for index construction and tested it for specificity and significance. Next, please. So just the background on Iloilo City, it is located in central Philippines and has a population of almost 500,000 as of last year. There are 180 barangays or communities within the city, and it has a land area of 78.34 square kilometers. It is a coastal city. The social vulnerability study shows that the important factors that contribute to the social vulnerability of the barangays in the city are dependency, access to safe water, gender, literacy, housing materials, and house ownership. This explains 75.42% of the variation in the data. Next, please. We classified social vulnerability in Iloilo City according to low, moderate, and high based on standard deviations. And we can see that majority in Iloilo City are moderately vulnerable. Next, please. We integrated social vulnerability assessment with hazard and exposure data of the top 5 communities prone to flooding, storm surge, and drought, and we see these results. So we see how social vulnerability influence risk. For example, being a person with disability in flood-prone areas will have persons with disability in flood-prone areas will have difficulty when evacuation is necessary. Or, for example, women in drought-prone areas will be burdened, highly burdened during dry season because of lack of access to water. Next, please. So some insights from the study. Social vulnerability analysis shows the important factors that contribute to inherent vulnerability in communities and how this influence risks in disaster situations, as you have seen in the results. And integrating social vulnerability analysis with hazards and exposure data allows identification of the population and risks. We were able to, in our study, we were able to identify the groups where they are located and approximate the number of the people that will be affected. Knowing what contributes to social vulnerability, areas and aspects that need interventions are easily distinguished and addressed properly. So you can see that, for example, in areas where water access is almost 100%, then you see which area you can already put your intervention. Next, please. So if you look at social vulnerability study, it's comprehensive. The social vulnerability assessment allows the inclusion of multiple indicators, and it can include even non-income data, such as, for example, access to resources or lack of access to water or dependency. There you can focus to a specific variable of interest. For example, in Iloilo, we know that water is a problem, so therefore we included water access. It can be general to very, it allows general to very specific analysis. We got granular results, which make detailed analysis possible, which means that results can be broken down into pieces. We can go from general to specific, from the description of levels of vulnerability to looking at a specific variable that influence social vulnerability. Next, please. So we recommend that social vulnerability analysis should be included in development plans to address inherent vulnerabilities. It should be used as an input in designing policy interventions that promote resiliency. It can also be utilized to understand and address inequality and sources of inequality. And lastly, government institutions should invest in creating and maintaining a database and social vulnerability indicators to make all this possible. Thank you very much. And next, please. I just want to acknowledge, next, please, SICAR PH, ADMU, and partner institutions, NRC, Manila Observatory, IDRC, of course, Dr. Emma Porio for her leadership, inspiration, and of course, inputs to our study, the Iloilo City Local Government Unit, and of course, University of the Philippines, Visayas. Thank you very much and good morning.